Early Christian Classics. The story of the early Christian church is a complex, fascinating one. From the early days of persecution in the Roman Empire to legalization in the 4th century and the gradual spread of the gospel across subsequent centuries, Christianity survived and continued to evolve during some dark times in history. The attitudes of the very early Christians are represented here by two remarkable texts, the sayings of the Desert Father and the City of God. Both cast a great deal of light onto the early history of the church. In the latter part of the first millennium, following the collapse of the Roman Empire, the church became a major political player in Europe, while the monastic movement developed the theology and philosophy that underpinned the religion. This was the period in which the Christian church established its dominion over much of Europe, went into battle with the more recent Islamic faith in the Crusades, established the Inquisition to suppress the unorthodox, and ultimately separated into the Eastern and Roman branches of the Church, a schism that remains today. In this period, Christianity was primarily a paternalistic religion in which the message of Christ was interpreted for ordinary people by the priesthood. Within the Roman Church, Masses and Bibles continued to be propagated in Latin, even as that language died as an everyday tongue and became a historical relic. Texts from this period reveal a great deal of the history and development of the church, although their reliance on scholastic theology can make them dense and hard to empathize with today. From a modern perspective, it is more interesting to look at some of the books that started to emerge from about the 14th century onwards. From a distance, books of orthodoxy are less interesting than those thinkers who try to understand their own personal relationship with God. Writers such as Meister Eckhart and Margaret Porret departed from the orthodox teaching of the church to one degree or another and suffered the consequences. From this time onwards, the invention of the printing press also meant that unorthodox ideas could be rapidly circulated over distances that had been impossible in the Middle Ages. It is perhaps not surprising that the most enduring writing of this period was produced by thinkers who were starting to question the established church in one way or another. Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross were reacting against the luxury and decadence of their contemporaries in the church when they founded the discarded Carmelites. Even John Bunyan, who was writing after the establishment of the Protestant Church of England, was fighting for his own Puritan ideals against the prevailing orthodoxy of his country. In this section of the book, we encounter some mysticism, several puritanical approaches, and the back to basics Christianity of Saint Francis, who dared to take Christ at his word when he implored his followers to spread the word without shoes or money. Several of the authors in this section were condemned as heretical in their time, while others, such as Teresa of Avila and Saint Francis, had to battle for their views against opposition. To the modern reader, the appeal of these books lies in seeing the individual struggling with the demands of trying to live a good life, attempting to reach their own understanding of the Christ's message and their own comprehension of the divine, rather than simply relying on received wisdom. Instead of regarding the individualism of these writers as heresy or unorthodoxy, we can understand that they were merely aiming to reach a more complete and authentic understanding of their spirituality. There is also a great deal of poetry and beauty in titles such as The Little Flowers of Saint Francis and Dark Night of the Soul. While The Pilgrim Progress has been a hugely influential work of literature over the subsequent centuries, beyond their spiritual message, these books are a reminder of the enormous contribution that spiritual writing has made to the cultural and intellectual development of the modern world. Sayings of the Desert Fathers. The Desert Fathers, 4th century. Let us charge into the good fight with joy and love, without being afraid of our enemies. Though unseen themselves, they can look at the face of our soul, and if they see it altered by fear, they take up arms against us all the more fiercely. For the cunning creatures have observed that we are scared, so let us take up arms against them courageously. No one will fight with a resolute fighter. For an insight into the attitudes of the very early church, there is no better place to start than with the sayings of the Desert Fathers, which have been published in a variety of collections, sometimes under the Latin name of Apophthegmata Patrum.